Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob, Space Trucker, Chapter 32, written by Regal Legal Eagle. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. The war in space against America had ground to a halt in the Xeno front. With engines incapable of FTL speeds, it would take years to reach the human space. The fact that the Council had forbidden FTL tech other than the FTL gates meant that no one was prepared for the sudden takeover of the FTL network in human space. The battle for TR-231 had proven how woefully unprepared the Council races were for the war with a species that had no interest in fighting properly, as the rest of the galaxy had for centuries. The human forces had suffered heavy casualties, but they'd not only wiped out all the Council forces in the area, they'd captured a dreadnought and saved the Lucifer's hammer in the process. This with being outnumbered 100 to 1 in terms of personnel. The key had been to turn the FTL lanes back on, given the broken fleet hopes to escape. But as they turned and prepared to flee, the humans just turned the gates back off. Across the galaxy, the Council species were learning just how little humanity cared for playing fair, or even being reasonable when it came to conflict. Scout vessels would fight to the death rather than surrender. Special forces would refuse to fight openly and instead harass and snipe garrisons. Not to mention, the carrier groups that had glassed the crab colony were still on the loose. They'd jump into a system, destroy a merchant fleet, and an orbital docks before jumping away. The Council was already having trouble convincing the member species to keep carrying military supplies. Most were opting for civilian supplies only, and marking their ships to avoid such the wrath of the Americans. When the Council member species approached the species the humans referred to as the Borks for protection, the Council knew that they were in trouble. Member species were starting to prepare to join the fight, due to the obligation to the galactic government, but the staggering losses inflicted upon the Council founders made making them drag their heels to speak. 3 outlying Kittian colonies, the closest neighbor to the humans, had surrendered to the scout ships that were merely probing the systems. While no one seriously believed that 5 Marines could actually occupy each of the planets, they could force the Kittians to fight. Not to mention that all the Kittian military vessels in the region were reporting engine trouble. The Fillers, the Fleckos, as the human called them, has long feared the ground force that performed countless invasions through the history of the galactic government. But against the humans, they were useless. Their cultural battle dances meant nothing to the humans who'd just cut them down with ballistic weapons. Although there were scattered reports of humanity military forces beating them at their own game by outdancing them, this wasn't the norm. Crusticans and Greslins were all the only 2 species that were effective in ground combat against humanity, and while the galactic government had the numbers to defeat them in space, and on the ground no one was relishing the fact that it was going to take dozens of their own casualties for every American killed. They needed a win, but the Americans had destroyed the FTL gates closest to the planet, meaning it took days for ships to bring in reinforcements. This was leading to a cycle in the siege. Americans would have to repel mass waves for a local day, and then get 2 to recover. Theoretically, siege warfare should favor the Xenos, who had superior shielding technology and superior numbers. Americans, however, enjoyed messing with the theoretical warfare and actual warfare. Lines had been formed since the first week of the war in Bastion that hadn't changed much since. The humans had been building up their fortifications at a speed unheard of to the Xenos thanks to their strength and the fact that they were so used to wars with ballistic weapons that this was second nature to them. This did mean that they had to keep everything in working order, however, and since the military was most accustomed to blowing things apart than building them up, they had to employ certain siege masters to keep everything in check. The siege master of Sector 7 knew that they had 2 full days to repair after the mass assault waves, but he was already out on the front lines to attack. His helmet painted yellow, and his construction loader was in the thick of it. He had a cigar in his mouth, and he worked the loader along with his emplacements. Even as the crabs blew up the bunker with artillery fire, he was there with the medics, bolting new plates into the place. Sector 7's line had never faltered, and it was a large thanks to the siege master. But the officers at the command bunkers on the second line were still watching him, as the captain tried to explain to the colonel what they were seeing. So, how come he doesn't wait? I mean, he's great help, but we have to watch the artillery fire, or else we might hit the crazy Frecker. He says he has to keep up with his wife's kill count, and this is the only way to do it. As they watched, the construction loader turned and stomped onto a charging crab, crushing it in a gush of what hydrating mucus they were covered in. Then one of the forearms lashed out and a massive saw blade cutting through another two before it turned back to the job at hand. The paint was partially melted on the outside of the loader. The bot had a good generator, but he absorbed a hell of a lot more fire. So, our siege master is in competition with his wife, and that's why he's hell-bent on killing as many crabs as possible, while also fixing our fortifications. That's correct, sir. The bot staggered as the armored crab in a power suit advanced, firing the much bigger energy weapon it possessed. The construction bot turned around and pulled up a bolt gun at the appropriate size for a 10-foot-tall machine. It charged forward, grappling with the armored crab before pressing the bolt gun to its face and diving a steel bolt through its brain of the crab inside. Then it moved back to the bunker it was fixing, bolting the final slab of steel before knocking on it with a big steel fist to indicate that he was done. The Marines inside quickly moved the gear back into position, and the construction bot jogged down the line. The crab flyer had ploughed into the section of emplacement as it died, and the crabs were swarming all over the area to take advantage of the temporary hole in the lines. But it was very temporary. The bot ignited an oxyacetylene torch, and the crabs started to flee, but not before a dozen of them had been part burned, part melted by the stream of fire. Then the bot pulled the flyer apart, hammering the metal into the appropriate shapes to fill the hole made by its demise. When another wave of crabs tried to advance in the construction bot, it ripped a chunk of metal free of the flyer and turned, throwing a fastball at the crab holding a matter slammer. The chunk of metal pulped the crab as the others began to scatter once more. One guy in a construction bot is doing the work of our usual combat engineer team. Yes, sir. While under fire, the bot finished forming the flyer into a makeshift barricade and then climbed over it, hammering the top of the wreckage flat, and then picking up a collection of sandbags to form a better protection firing position. Nearby Marines were waiting with 50 cal, which the bot picked up and bolted into place on top of the barricade that it had just made. The Marines started to swarm up and fire down on the advancing crabs now that the barricade had been formed for them. I mean, it is his job as a siege master. They're supposed to advise us on where to build emplacements and keep them repaired after the fighting is over. You didn't think to report this to me sooner. This man deserves a freaking medal, even if he is going through our construction supplies like a record rates. The colonel and the captain left the command bunker, and the bot approached the supply depot nearby to restock and rearm. As they got closer, the colonel could see the writing on the back of the bot. It was a bit smudged here and there, but it was obviously reapplied every day to keep it legible. It was a list of sorts. It read, Ted Rex, Archangel Captain, bad at sports. Mary Jane, Ghost Corps Sergeant, softball outfielder. Jackie Jill, goddamn swimmer. Stevie Ray, fricking naval engineer. But also Letterman QB. Then, at the bottom it said, Billy Bob, national fricking baseball champ. This was underlined. The colonel looked at his captain. Wait, you don't mean... The construction bot turned and the man inside got a good look at the two officers. He blew a stream of cigar smoke out of the corner of his mouth. What? Those names on the back of your bot, do you mean to say that you're... That's right. The man nodded and turned back to keep picking up supplies. I really am Marty Stew, father of the national champ, Billy Bob. The officers glanced at one another. You mean the guy who started this war, right? The proud American who vowed to fight injustice and terrorism rampant in the galactic government. Shouldn't that be on the back of your bot? No, it's Billy Bob, national champ. But the bot turned to the man angrily growled, Billy Bob, national champ. Then he began to strut off towards the front lines again as he played music over the suit's external speaker. Well, you can tell by the way I use my walk that I'm a ladies' man with no time to talk. See, that's what I mean, Colonel. He's a strange guy. All he cares about is the fact that his son is Billy Bob, national champ. Billy Bob's greatest injury from entering the strange pocket dimension had been when he came flying out onto the floor. So he pulled himself up after Emily got off of him, still hugging the stuffed animal he found and rubbed its neck. Looking around the room, how much time passed? Just a minute or so, maybe, the chief sneaky busybody said. Oh, well, I guess time in a pocket dimension passes at a speed of regular time. Then he shrugged a bit. He had no idea how any of that stuff worked, but he knew that it wasn't the same as the skip drives that bounced off the edge of reality. This pocket dimension was much more calm, and it didn't feel like the colors that didn't exist were trying to force their way into your eyeballs. He looked over at Emily, who was obviously happy that 6-limbed stuffed bunny back. Hugging it to her chest, she nuzzled it. What's that about? Percy. He's my favorite stuffed animal. When they gave me a pocket dimension, they told me to try it out with something personal. And then I couldn't get it back, so I was really mad about that. But here he is. She gave him another squeeze. Yeah, but why do you have him? Oh, well, this represents these animals on our home planet. They make for very good pets, but you have to be careful since they have delicate skin. Parents give their kids one of these and check for scratch marks to see if the child is ready for a pet. She happily nuzzled the toy and saw her feathers ruffle a bit as she rubbed her face against the fake fur. Or he assumed it was fake fur. Billy Bob looked at her for a moment and thought about how much pain that she had caused him by being very unaware of his delicate skin. Then he gasped and pointed at her. They never let you have one, did they? They kept checking the toy and realized how you killed that poor thing in a second. She stopped cuddling the thing as she looked up wide-eyed and red-handed, winged, and he still couldn't figure out how the best way to translate his sayings to her species. I mean, she did have hands, whatever. She opened her mouth for a moment and then closed it. Well, she clutched his face with both of her hands as the realization hit him. That's why you're so bad with your claws. Looks fine that I can just keep wearing my gloves. We make them for a reason. But not good enough for your parents. What kind of diplomat can't keep the needs of a creature who simply wants to not be torn to shreds by your sharp claws? Emily stared at him for a moment and then glanced away as he stared at her. It took him a moment, but then he saw factors quickly connecting in his head. The black survival suit, the pocket dimension. She knew about the Libertonian team hiding in the council system. The fight back at the museum. She didn't know quite what to do, but she knew more than a diplomat should. Wait. Even back in the battling of the space clown, she knew how to hotwire a security panel. She was turned on by killing. He gasped this time, and it was even deeper and more drawn out as he pointed at her. You're not a diplomat at all. She looked worried as he said that, which was about as much confirmation as he needed. Well, I mean, I am. But my training, lies upon lies. It's like I don't even know you. That's why you were so surprised I didn't hunt, and why you've even been worried about all the death and gore and stuff. You didn't hesitate when those crabs attacked us for the museum. Just the books, 'cause you didn't have your gear. But you said you weren't a soldier because... His eyes went wide. You're a space assassin, aren't you? She stood there, wings seeming more closed around her shoulders than usual. She was holding a stuffed animal close still, but was glancing around rather than looking right at him. Finally, she glanced at him with one eye and tried to gauge his reaction. Are you mad? He could tell how worried she was at the sudden realization why some things about her had never quite added up. He'd never really thought about some of the inconsistencies because it was so close to his own behavior. But now so much of it made sense. A real diplomat would have been freaked out by all the chaos and laws that I was breaking, and you'd have realized the feelings that you had for me sooner. And we've been solving everything through violence. You've never opposed the idea, because that would have been your ideal. Not to mention getting off the museum planet, you were okay with the plan to slaughter our way into the base because you didn't know how to talk us through it either. Since all the violence was turning you on, you didn't realize that you were getting attached to me, which would start off your crazy hormone drive because you thought it was normal sort of arousal from all the combat. Oh, my Washington. She clutched her stuffed animal, looking at him with more worry and apprehension as she looked ready to either cry or beg for forgiveness and acceptance. Then he started laughing. The hamsters and Emily all blinked in confusion as his boisterous laugh filled the room, the corners of his eyes filling with tears as the whole situation simply took control of his mind from him, and laughing so hard that he had to clutch his sides and sit down. Slowly, his laughter died out as he had to take some deep breaths to make sure that all the laughing he'd done. Finally, he shook his head and rubbed a few tears away from the corners of his eyes. Too funny. You're not mad. She looked hopeful now, her wings opening up a little as he seemed more amused about what he had found than anything else. Why keep it a secret? Yeah, that's fine. I can see why an assassin wouldn't be all like, hey, I'm an assassin, to some random civvy they just met, especially one as weird as me. But you have been planning on telling me some point, and if you're an assassin, why did you just say that we'd have all the diplomatic dinners to go to? Well, I like diplomatic dinners. I'm not allowed to be the prime diplomat because I'm not a very good one. He laughed again and let out a happy sigh. Oh, too good? Well, that explains a lot. It really does. I'm guessing you were going to tell me eventually. Once this was all over, she looked a little bashful as she reached out with her two left hands to stroke his face and shoulder. You're not mad. Billy Bob just smiled and pulled her upper hand to his lips and gave her a light kiss. Nah, but it explains a lot. Could have saved me a lot of time figuring out things if you'd just been upfront about it. Of course, this does mean that I have to even be more careful about you. It was bad enough when I figured that you weren't used to other species. But now that I know you enjoy hurting me, that's going to take some adjustment. I do not. Always a mistake, I swear. Uh-huh, he said with a slow nod. The entire time the hamsters had been staring back and forth between the two of them. Clearly, they weren't interested in interrupting the two predators from Deathworlds, especially when one of them apparently enjoyed violence, while the others simply used it rather often. Finally, the chief sneaky busybody raised his hand. Yes, Billy Bob asked. We're about to meet up with the space goblin ship that we mentioned. Oh. He got up and Emily looked conflicted about where to put her stuffed animal. Just bring it, stow it in the Longhorn, and then when we head out into the cargo bay. She smiled at that, and then they exited the captain's room as they walked down to the cargo bay. Emily stashed Percy into the Longhorn while they waited for the other ship to dock with the Atlas. Since it was a cargo ship, there was a docking back made for the cargo transfers such as this one, although Billy Bob still wasn't sure what it was they were picking up. With the airlock open, Billy Bob nodded at the space goblins who were escorting a crate into the cargo bay. Most of the hamsters were still at their stations around the ship. They tried to break jobs down into specific tasks as possible, since they had terrible at multitasking. There was a reason Billy Bob could pilot a thing on his own, but it took a while for the bridge crew of hamsters. Billy Bob helped the goblins stand the large crate that they'd brought in on its edge and then looked around. While they all looked at him, soon everyone was sort of looking around at each other because no one had spoken. Finally, he held up his hands. So, what's up? Oh, right, Billy Bob, this is the engineer I told you about, Mike Zubitz. The chief sneaky busybody said. You didn't tell me about an engineer. No? No. Ah, well, I meant to tell you about him. He's here with your suit that I told you about. You didn't mention a suit either. You said something to help disguise me. Oh. Well, I'll let him explain. The hamster shuffled back as one of the lead goblins smiled up at Billy Bob. It was a unique challenge to be assured that I had to make this with as much more dense material than normal. A challenge to work with such made it very enjoyable for me. So, I present to you. He pushed a button on the side of the crate, and the door opened to reveal a Bork. A bit bigger than Billy Bob standing there, eyes closed. It took a moment before Billy Bob blinked and stepped back. Wait, you made me a suit out of a Bork? It's not real, it's disguised power suit, the goblin said with a big grin. Then Billy Bob blinked and stepped up and gave it a tap. The fur didn't quite feel right, and usually flesh didn't make a metallic noise when he tapped it. Holy crap, he muttered as he looked it over. That's awesome. That's how well we were able to freak up the security even better. Perfect. He was obviously excited. Wait, but I don't know how to pilot a power suit. Well, you need to learn quick, Emily said. He tapped his chin and shrugged as he slowly worked the power suit out of the case he was in. I do know the perfect song for getting used to something quickly in a short amount of time. He smiled and then quickly connected his implant into the speakers of the cargo room. Soon they were all listening to a song as he started to try and open the back of the power suit. The 3 hours approaching. Just to give it your best. You've got to reach your prime. That's when you need to put yourself to the test. And show us your passage of time. We are going to need a montage. Montage! Oh, it's a montage. However, as the song finally faded out, Billy Bob had just gotten himself to fit inside the suit. Frick, is this song over already? For some reason I was kinda hoping that it would somehow let me learn how to pilot this thing better over the course of the song. It's just a song, Billy Bob. You actually have to train, Emily said as she shook her head. I know that, damn it. But I'm going to put on repeat for the next couple of hours, so you guys won't want to clear out of here. He internalized the speaker and began to move slowly in the suit. Emily shook her head as the hamsters moved away with the goblins to discuss their payment. And next plans. Billy Bob was soon alone in the cargo bay, slowly moving around as he had his own little montage going in his head. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker, and National Champion. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.